Hello everyone and welcome back to a short reviews video for June 2022. This is a monthly segment where I basically talk about those albums and EPs that I don't really had that many things to say, so I put them all in this section over here. It contains projects that I rate from 6+ to 4-. Some of them I do recommend them as they might be more to your liking, others I don't really recommend them to you. So with all that being said, let's just jump straight into the video. After really enjoying the results of this KayCyy EP with KayCyy, I was certainly curious to see what he was gonna do with this mixtape. I was anticipating an album as this is what was speculated, but instead we got a pretty short mixtape over here in which do not really expect that much out of it. I would say that for what it does, it's actually a pretty decent project, which in some cases I feel like I ended up liking it more than I expected. But still do not get into this with high expectations. It's a pretty average trap and R&B release in terms of the production and the vocals as well. There's nothing really all that exceptional about it. This is another project that I discovered this year, and so I got into this EP having a few expectations, but I honestly didn't really find this particular EP, which is a part of a series that I haven't really followed, to be all that great. Actually, I found this to be a pretty bad release and one of my least favorite directions when it comes to this raw black metal sound, as there is not really something all that distinct over here. It sounds more like background noise. There doesn't really seem to be that much of a substance here, and it's more like a bunch of ideas being thrown together, just some outtakes that I don't really believe they managed to do all that much by themselves. So I believe that this is just an EP that didn't really have that much to offer. I remember enjoying Mold's latest full-length album, which I found to be a pretty decent death metal work. This EP over here, after a decent introduction, it basically just had two death metal and technical death metal tracks that felt kinda bland and generic. I didn't particularly like the mixing and the production in this one in particular. I feel that it was just a pretty decent release for what it did, but certainly not one of those that I see myself returning that much into. I believe that it was just average for what it did. I honestly expected kinda more out of this new album from the algorithm. This is a pretty interesting artist when it comes to some of the combinations of sounds he does, going into this really weird and obscure cyber metal direction with some really nice elements to the sound. But with this new album over here, it seems that the obscurity and the abstract nature of his previous works is kinda toned down a little bit, and I believe that it makes for ideas that for the most part they just sound pretty okay, and that's pretty much about it. Now, the algorithm has always been an artist who I can't really get that much into full-length works, mainly just enjoying certain aspects about what he does with the songs, because even if we're talking about a pretty short album over here, it sounds somewhat bloated. I would prefer for some of those ideas to be expanded into something more and giving much more of an impact, which I believe that it's somewhat missing with some of the ideas over here. There are some interesting elements and some weird directions where this album is going, but not something really all that much exceptional. Like, if you have heard previous algorithm releases, I don't believe that this one does something really all that special. It's just pretty decent. Now, this is an album that certainly disappointed me. I wasn't necessarily expecting that much out of the new Chase and Status album, but I was certainly hoping for more than just this. And I believe that the album actually did a pretty decent introduction. There were some tracks that I ended up enjoying a lot and finding some really cool elements over here. But for the most part, I believe that this was an extremely weak album in terms of its sound and production, and especially when it comes to the guest vocals, which I found it to be quite irritating at some occasions. And it's a little bit all over the place, going from raga jungle to dance floor drum and bass, and there were also multiple occasions throughout this album in which they went into liquid drum and bass directions, which could be something quite promising, but I believe that they didn't really deliver in any of those aspects, as they made for some really weak tracks that felt like really bland and boring for the genre. So yeah, for me, this was an album that I didn't really like. J.K. Flesh returns with another banging industrial techno release. After a pretty weird introduction with his power noise track, I was actually curious if it was gonna go in the same direction, but no, for the most part we get a pretty basic approach in what we've already heard with previous releases of J.K. Flesh and his approach of industrial techno music, which I believe it's fine at certain points, but I don't really believe that it contains some of its greatest and most compelling ideas, in this EP in particular, in which it mostly felt like outtakes from the album that we got about this year. It is still a pretty okay release, but certainly not the one that would recommend to you if you want to start with JK Flesh. I believe that he has done many other projects that are much better than this. I don't really know how to feel about this particular album. I like it, I believe that it's an enjoyable release, but it's a huge one. But I can't really see what's that much different about this particular release in comparison to some of the previous ones that he did, especially the more recent ones. Even if he claims that some of his previous projects were more of a joke and he didn't really take them seriously, I can't really see what Vinyl Days does that is that much more sincere, much more thought out, and that much better in comparison to anything else he has done previously. I like some of the approaches that he takes with some of the instrumentals going into this more old school direction, and I believe that the production in some cases is pretty cool. I like the sampling choices, but still we get a really bloated and huge album over here with 30 songs and almost 70 minutes of material, with almost half of this album being skits and interludes and basically just getting multiple people talk about Logic, which I get it, I can understand it, it fits with Logic's style and how he approaches his music and how passionate he is for what he creates, but I can't really get into all of those interludes, like I'm never gonna remember them, and there are just so many of them that take huge space out of the album. So for me at the end of the day, many of the tracks and interludes feel like filler material, which yeah, I don't know, pretty enjoyable release, but for me honestly Logic has done more compelling stuff, and even lyrically there's not really something all that much special about this particular release or something that much new to him. I still believe that there are some pretty corny lyrics over here, but whatever, I believe that it's a fine release, but certainly not the one where I see Logic really developing his sound and his rapping abilities and making what is supposedly one of his greatest projects. Pretty cool, chill album, some nice ideas, decent production, but really boring. I got bored of it pretty easily. I believe it's a bit of a bloated album with many tracks that I don't really care for. I think that it's good for like a vibe to just chill and relax. It has some interesting ideas to it, but certainly not one in which I see myself ever returning to. The brand Jonestown Massacre does another album that it seems to go into those pretty basic and average directions of neo-psychedelia and psychedelic rock, in which I don't really believe that it works that much well with some of their latest releases, which have been pretty underwhelming in my opinion, but I ended up really liking some of the ideas over here, never to the point though where I would see myself returning to any of the songs. I believe that it's a pretty decent album, it has some nice riffs, and at least it's a bit better than some of the latest stuff that we get in this really safe and standard psychedelic sound. So I believe that this is kind of a plus, but still definitely not one of the best releases out of the brand Jonestown Massacre. Now I get it that there have been multiple years since Porcupine 3 have ended up making a release, but I don't really believe that this is that much of a grand return. I believe that this is a pretty nice album in terms of what he does. There are still some pretty cool sections and some progressive elements that sound pretty nice, but at the end of the day I don't really believe that there's something all that exceptional about this release. There are some nice chill moments, and then there are some other sections where it is pretty heavy with some of the progressive metal elements sounding pretty solid, but yeah, I don't really believe that there is that much to this particular album. It makes for a decent return, but not a grand return. The thing is that when it comes to the full-length albums of Zola Jesus, I always see the potential. I like what she does with instrumentation, and I believe that her voice is really beautiful and really passionate. There are many things to like about Zola Jesus and her dark direction on art pop and post-industrial, but I've never really managed to get into one of her albums as a whole thing. There has never been a case for me, unfortunately, where she has done something exceptional, even though I really see the potential, and I believe that this album is not that much of an exception. I once again see lots of promising ideas over here and lots of tracks that sound pretty cool. Some of the more industrial beats are awesome, the vocals sound excellent once again, but I believe that there are a few other moments that are like really minimal and kinda lackluster, not really having that much to them, or there are some other moments where we get some of a more analog drumming and beats in which it doesn't really feel all that complimenting. Still a pretty dark and haunting release in some occasions, but still another one that in my opinion had potential for even more. pretty indifferent with this brand new EP of Counterstrike once again. I believe that the tracks are pretty short, there could have been more to them, they feel like they go for just so little, but still even the instrumentals, even though they have this dark and menacing feel to them, I still can't really get that much into them. I believe that they're just okay, but still kinda boring, kinda meh, not really caring for it as much. And that was all for my short reviews video of June 2022. What's your opinion on any of those albums and EPs? Like them, dislike them, why, and what do you want to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.